You're listening to Learning Liberation, the Ethnic Studies Podcast. I'm your co-host, Juana Teresa Tello. This episode is dedicated to highlighting ethnic studies curriculum in elementary schools, particularly in the fifth grade classroom. This episode's interviewers are Kate Frazier and Dr. Ronnie Gordon, both co-assistant directors at Whole Child within the Tacoma Washington Public Schools. Kate began her career as a high school teacher and school counselor and has served in multiple positions throughout her 23 years in education, each with significant impact on her passion for centering equity and anti-racist practices. Ronnie has more than 20 years of experience serving and learning side by side with youth, families, and community in the arenas of community education, service, and social justice. Ronnie recently heeded the call to return to his home community to continue learning and serving. Kate and Ronnie had the opportunity to interview Dana Harris, who is currently teaching fifth grade ethnic studies in North Thurston Public Schools. Prior to this, she served as a district instructional coach and developed and recorded over 150 ELA lessons for elementary teachers to use during remote learning instruction. All the lessons were aligned with the social justice standards and highlighted diverse cultural perspectives. She is also the author of www.teachinghumanity.org, an online resource for curated children's books, educator resources, recent book reviews and recommendations, and a guide to choosing anti-racist books that address social justice.
Hello, folks. My name is Dr. Ronnie Gordon. We are here on the land of the Squally people who have been the caregivers of this land since time immemorial. If you don't know much about the tribe or whose ancestors' land you are on, I highly suggest you spend some time doing some research and getting to know the tribe as well as the land that you live on. I would also highly suggest an intentional relationship and opportunity to connect with the tribe in order to continue to champion their work as well as the histories of the tribe. I'm here with my co-hosts.
Hi, I'm Kate Frazier, and I'm excited to be here in space with both of you today. We're here interviewing Dana Harris, who is a fifth grade ethnic studies teacher in North Thurston School District in Lacey, Washington. And we have a couple questions for you. We're excited to have this opportunity. I know that Ronnie and I have known your work for a while, but to actually sit down and process kind of your journey together is, it's going to be a lot of fun today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just would love to start off with you just telling us about your journey, like this journey of becoming an ethnic studies teacher.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like my journey has been my whole life. I was born, my mom is from the Philippines and my dad is Ecuadorian and Irish. And so being in this multicultural household with this central belief of like the oneness of humanity, when I first heard about ethnic studies, it just resonated so much with my heart. And I remember I was sitting in a equity meeting and our equity team was kind of talking about, is it possible for us to bring K-12 ethnic studies to our school district? And I was thinking, wow, I've only heard it in the context of, college. And so I just can't imagine. At that time I was teaching first grade. I just couldn't imagine what that would look like in a first grade classroom, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so when it was approved by our school board and we brought Shido to be our teachers to our district, I was definitely like, I'm signing up for that first cohort. And so we spent a year together really learning. And that was probably it was the most exciting time for me professionally. It was when I felt like I could be the most myself as an adult in a professional space ever. And also I just learned so much about me, also about who I am as an educator and what I can bring to the space that's so different from what my formal education had taught me. And so this will be my third year teaching ethnic studies. I teach in fifth grade and I'm just living my best life.
You touched on something, Dana. Do you feel like part of that learning was some unlearning too?
Oh, definitely. I was a history major, and I feel like so much of what I learned was just information that that didn't matter at that time. And to me, it made me feel like, well, maybe I'm not smart enough, and maybe this is what matters in society, but I don't find it as important. So there was something wrong with me. So I kind of had to unlearn that belief about myself that I am enough, and that there is more to learn than what I was taught.
So not just his story.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you for that. Tell us about a time when your teaching was the most impactful and why.
Yeah, this year has just been a tremendous year, and it built from last year, because last year my class, they came in and I asked them, why do we say the land acknowledgement? And I was really surprised that even though at my school we said it every morning, and these are fifth graders who have gone through our school now since, most of them since kindergarten, still had no understanding really of why we said the land acknowledgement. And so I put together a series of lessons that ultimately culminated to my students wanting to create a video to teach the younger kids about why we say the land acknowledgement. It was super satisfying for me. It was so wonderful. And I thought, there's no way I could ever top this, and I'll probably do something similar this year. But the Nisqually tribe wrote a letter this year, and the Nisqually tribe, we're on Nisqually land. The state is proposing to put an airport in our community on Nisqually land. And the tribe responded with a letter that is just, the perfect example of persuasive writing for an ELA teacher, but then also the perfect, just setting out all of these claims and how this airport violates the tribe's treaty rights. And, our treaties are the supreme law of the land according to our U.S. Constitution, which is also important fifth grade learning. And so we presented this letter to my students and just said, are these claims even valid? So just like we started exploring, and the tribe is talking about the salmon and how they have rights to half the salmon in our rivers. And well, is that actually true? Let's research that. And we're actually going out to the watershed and, going out to our Nisqually River. We're testing different elements. This was already something part of like our field trips, where we're testing the pH, we're testing dissolved oxygen, all these pieces. So my students really have this deep understanding of what a healthy watershed really is, and realizing that actually their claims are very valid, because if we do put an airport there, we're going to cut down trees, and that's going to affect the dissolved oxygen. And they're like putting all of these pieces together. We just started throwing all of this knowledge onto the walls, literally, and making little connections with yarn, between what they're saying and what we're actually learning. And it just looked like a crime scene on my wall there for a little while, And so in my mind, I'm thinking at the end, we're going to, create another video, because that's what my students did last year, and they did a really good job, But part of being an ethnic studies teacher is letting your students develop that agency. And we created this list of all these things that they could do. Like we can, put a blimp in the air with a sign that says "Protect the Watershed." That was one of their ideas.
I love that.
I know. One of their other ideas was we can boycott airports like the civil rights activists, because they were referring to the bus boycott, which I was really proud that they're using their history of resistance to try to, they even said we can stop eating in airports like Gandhi, or we can not even, fly anywhere. But then, several of them were like, no, I'm going to Disney. Like, we can't do that one, But then one of the things on their list was we can make a website, And so that became the most viable option. I let them, we made this list, and you all go out and research each piece of this, and then we'll come back and decide what we're going to do. And what they decided they want to do was create a website. And so each of them just took a piece of this website, and there's 30 kids, and they either worked individually, or they might work with a friend, or some of them worked in bigger partnerships, because it's just like, well, we need someone to explain, all of these pieces of the health of the watershed. We need someone to explain Indian boarding schools and the learning that we did there. We need someone to explain treaties, and so all the kids were just like, I'll do that. And it just within a matter of a week, they created content for this website. And it's a fantastic resource explaining that, this is a violation of our treaty with the Nisqually people. And for that reason, we stand with our Nisqually tribe in opposing this airport. And so because of this work, they were invited to present at represent our school at the Billy Frank Jr. celebration here in our community, and they were able to, with the district, present gifts to the Nisqually tribe. It was just this really beautiful night of celebration and like wrapping our arms around this community. And for me, it just felt so authentic the way we were, it was more than just, we love the Nisqually tribe. It's like, no, we've actually researched your culture, your history, your, language. We even had Lushootseed teachers come in and teach us how to say, protect the watershed, so it was just a really, really satisfying, professionally satisfying experience for me. And it really made the kids feel as if, this was my project, because it wasn't my project. My project was a video with their teacher. I mean, their teacher's idea was the video, theirs was the website, and it became so much more than what I had envisioned.
I love how that presenting that letter sparked that curiosity that grew into something so much bigger than I'm sure you imagined at that time, right? But that just that curiosity and those connections, and actually when I think about from the persuasive essay that you spoke to, like in science and all those pieces being incorporated in by this kind of essential question that they were looking for or trying to think deeply about. So
I mean, I'm even thinking about how I had a Nisqually student in my class, and at one point we dissected a salmon to understand, the salmon and what it needs. And during the salmon dissection, he explained that, salmon is so important to us that we bake salmon at all of our ceremonies. We bake salmon at weddings, and it's like I could share that information with my students, but when it comes from, a Nisqually student, it impacts you differently. So if we built an airport and you only got like half the salmon, like your family and your whole community is really impacted if you bake salmon at every ceremony. It was just like, it's really impactful. And then that piece also too with salmon, they here in our community, they throw the carcass back into the water. And these folks that we partner with at the Nisqually River Foundation do a great job of explaining to my students that, we do this because salmon is a keystone species, and, their bones are the nutrients but my students are like, oh, we already know this because we've listened to the story of Salmon Boy, which is an indigenous story. That's this beautiful, it just teaches, it's passing down that scientific knowledge of salmon being a keystone species, but it's also passing down like cultural and community practices of like respecting your elders and why that's so important for a community to function. And to me, that's really powerful because, when you Google scientist, you don't see an indigenous storyteller, but yet that's where a lot of this knowledge has roots,
For sure, in the sense of collectivism coming together to create one footprint, the website and beyond that, right? All these young people coming together to create that. And even beyond that, I mean, you talked about storytellers. For a lot of folks of color, oral tradition is a big piece of our stories, right? Trying to stay away from the word history, but our stories that are here and still present and being shared, since the beginning of time.
Awesome.
So that has me thinking too, just about the social emotional learning connection, right? I know Ronnie and I, as part of our work in the district that we're in, is really embedding social emotional learning or just social emotional supports, right, within the classroom, that it's not this one thing on the side, but it's really embedded in all that we do. And so when I think about the story you just told and shared with us, and just ethnic studies overall, like what do you see are the connections with social emotional learning and ethnic studies?
Yeah, the way that we approach in traditional schools right now, social emotional learning, is it's like, this is your time slot to do social emotional learning, versus in an ethnic studies classroom, it is. That's what we are doing throughout the entire day. And also in traditional classrooms, it's very much individual focused. How do I kind of survive in this environment when other people are doing things I might not like, or if I have a disagreement? It's like the assumption is that, as an individual, in order for you to succeed, you need to have a set of skills, rather than recognizing that we are a community and that each one brings all of these beautiful points of light that add to each other's learning, add to our social experience, add to our emotional experience in such beautiful ways. So what are those skills, talents, beauties that you bring? And so I feel that as an ethnic studies teacher, it's my job to help them identify what those things are. So one of the first things we do is create an identity portrait where they do a self-portrait, and on one side it's who they look like on the outside, what everyone sees, and on the other side, so on the left, it's what the world sees, and on the right, it's all those pieces of me that the world might not see. So my beliefs, my family, my race, my culture, my interests, all of these pieces that make me who I am. And what's interesting is for so many of my students at the beginning of the year, it's like, these are the video games I like to play. These are the YouTubers I like to watch. And these are the brands I like, And so to me, that's a wonderful formative assessment, because now it's my job all year to help them connect with what are their talents, what are their skills. And this year I had a student, we read this book called Drawn Together, and it's about a grandson and a grandfather who are struggling to connect because there's a communication barrier. They speak different languages. And so, but then at one point they recognize they both love to draw. And so then they start creating art together, and it's that point of connection. But then it starts getting awkward between them again, and they realize that they need to take on one another's kind of talents, like you draw this way, so I'm going to practice drawing that way, and you draw this way, so I'm going to practice drawing that way, and really just kind of understanding and trying to know one another in like a much more authentic way. And this book is mostly wordless. It's done all through kind of like a comic style of art. It's really beautiful. It's a picture book. And after that, we sat in a unity circle is what we call it, and we talked about what are some of those other barriers that we have with people. We talked about age, we talked about ability, and actually with ability, one of my students said that her sister has low muscle tone, and so when I play with her, we usually play like in my bed, we'll play dolls, or we'll play games where we can sit, so we don't really play outside. So she shared this, and it was just like this wonderful story. But then after this, I noticed that she really started to spend a lot more time building a relationship with this other student in my class who has cerebral palsy. And by the end of the year, I mean, they were just so connected, always wanting to do all their work together, always wanting to hang out. And her mother, the student's mother, told me during parent-student conference that she realized that she has special skills with students who have ability challenges because her sister has low muscle tone, and that's part of why she's gravitated toward this other person. And then I noticed on the wall, another teacher had asked some students, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she put their picture up on the wall with what they want to be. And she said she wants to help people who have like physical abilities, challenges. And to me, that is social emotional learning. It's recognizing what are my skills, talents, and how do I bring it to every space that I'm in.
A whole sense of belonging and connection. Thank you.
Yeah, through experience, and sometimes not knowing the experiences we have at home correlate to everything we do at school too, right? Or the opposite, some things we do at school can carry over to home. So bringing that into the classroom space to value the sense of who these young people are and who they're evolving into. Yeah, vulnerability. Thank you for that. Can you share an example of how caregivers' voices and experiences have contributed to your classroom community?
This was an area I was really trying to learn about this year, because I felt like my first year in ethnic studies, I was just so focused on my students that but a big piece of ethnic studies is unity in the community. And I decided to open the classroom on Fridays for families to come in during our lunch and talk about anything they would like to talk about, which left me as an educator feeling very worried and vulnerable. Who knows what people are going to come in and talk about. But it ended up being this wonderful collection of knowledge. I had a grandmother who came in and shared a recipe with us, and then we ended up talking to her about living in Alaska, because that just happened to come up, and then one parent was a school board member and talking to us about, how to be active in your school community and make sure your voice is heard. we had a father who's a barber, and he came in and kind of demonstrated how he uses measurement while he's working, to cut hair. And then we had a mother and father come in and told us all about Guam. And they told us about, just 20 minutes, the history, the culture, the geography, the community life of Guam. And, they also explained that Guam is like 8 miles wide and 30 miles long, but it was like larger than life to all of my students. They were so excited, wanted to get on their Chromebooks right away and research all about Guam, And so it got me thinking, and like, how do I center the family's knowledge as the knowledge that we are all going to start our learning from, was kind of that question that I had. And one of the pieces I was thinking was like, well, I need to teach them informational writing. What this family just did was basically give us informational, a writing piece all about Guam. And so I talked to them about that. I said, I need to teach you guys informational writing, and I'm noticing that so-and-so's family just gave you a lot of information, and I feel like we could even just write an essay right now based on what they gave us, and so then that essay became our anchor text. And so then we were also grappling with the question of what does unity in the community mean? And after that Billy Frank Jr. event, we noticed that we were studying what was it that people were doing at this event that was showing unity. And one of the things that they noticed is that there were a lot of different booths where people were sharing information about what they felt was important and connected to our Nisqually tribe. And so then we talked about how our multicultural night is coming up. And so what information do we feel is important that connects with a multicultural night? And so they decided that they wanted to do research on countries that they felt were important to them or their family. Wow. And so that's what we did. So I taught them informational writing with, this essay from the family as our anchor text. And they each just chose a country. They created these beautiful maps of the region of the country that they chose. And, then their report was next to it, and they were hung up at our multicultural night. It's really beautiful.
Wow. Oh, what a great story, great example.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's amazing when we give time and space to those that are bringing up the young people, and how much wisdom and knowledge is there, right? And those shared oral traditions that sometimes are forsaken within formal education, because how the construction of formal education has begun. But yeah, that's really beautiful to even think about, and knowing the students, the next steps. I hear a lot of what you're speaking of as next steps, right? Going deeper, that depth rather than the breadth. Yes. Not only context and content, but people, storytelling. Yes.
And I, what I initially had thought was, I was worried that, what if the parents say things that are not really in line with what I'm looking for, or what if certain parents kind of try to take over with an agenda? But none of that happened. And what I also learned was that, for one, any of those parents who came into our classroom, when they came to Multicultural Night or any other event at our school, they're going to automatically feel like a part of the community, because all of my students are going to be like, oh, hi, they know them, And then the other piece is that my students had opportunities to talk to adults that they don't know, ask them questions about this recipe in Alaska and all of these things, right? And we know that when young people can develop those powers of expression, that they're more likely to be mentored, they're more likely to be chosen in leadership positions. And so it was really an opportunity for them to have a conversation with elders and really try to develop that comfort.
Which speaks to just the idea of unity within community. The root of unity is uni, which is one, right? And the root of community is community to come together. So that sense of oneness, like bringing folks together. So thank you for that.
So kind of wondering, as we talk about all these examples, and you're talking about just the Center of Ethnic Studies in your classroom, like overall, what does decolonializing education, let me retract that. What is decolonial education? What does it mean to you? Like, what is...
Yeah, when I started ethnic studies, I kept seeing that. I had seen that before, like decolonize your syllabus, and I'm like, what does that mean? It was when we learned about Indian boarding schools and the history there that it started to click for me, because what that was, an attempt to erase culture, language, history, and to make the assumption that our students are this empty cup and all of the knowledge comes from the teacher to fill that cup. And so when you think about that, that was a colonial project. So then decolonial is the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. And I think about my own experience, and my mom kind of tells this story that when I came home from kindergarten, she was talking to me in Filipino, and I said, don't talk to me in that language anymore because no one at school speaks that language. And so she stopped. And so now I've lost that opportunity to have that language. And how, when we talk about our multilingual programs and how that can really, revitalize culture, revitalize all these pieces, that just resonates with me so much because of my experience there. And then also as a history major where, I'm learning about the presidents or the people who ran for president, and then the name of the person who also ran but didn't win. I'm learning about this one battle that happened in this one place and how many soldiers were there, and all of these pieces of information that just felt so irrelevant to me. And now I'm learning about all of these pieces, like what? The Filipinos and the Mexicans were working together during the grape strike? I didn't know that. There's so many exciting pieces that we can make room for all of it. And so, when I think about decolonizing, that's what I think about. And I think about that cup too, that, I am there to facilitate the learning. I know my standards, I know the content, but the students are the ones that are kind of telling me where we need to go next. And that every day we have like a reflection circle. We call it Unity Circle, where we, after we've done some of our research, we come together and we just kind of start to co-create knowledge. This is what I was reading. This is what I was seeing. And then that becomes like that oral tradition becomes that knowledge that's going to stick much more so than if I were to stand up front and just lecture.
Absolutely.
With them.
Those multiple perspectives, right? And you use the phrase co-creating, how important it is to co-create, to be in space and create space with one another, versus that old adage of seeing the educator in front of the room being the expert.
Yes.
If you have 30 students, that's so much collective knowledge, no matter if they're 11 or 10 or 12 or 18. That's a lot of knowledge and experience, right? Yeah, that's something to think about. Also, resonate with me what you shared, that sense of decolonizing, even thinking about names, right? Kate and I had the privilege of being at Cheeto down in Tucson, right? Even just the language rather than Tucson, which is used now, or even we live close to what's perceived as Rainier, which is Tacoma, right? So even those spaces and places that we are in wherever we live, and constantly doing that for ourselves, So I really appreciate that. Yeah, definitely planting seeds.
There's one more question I'd would love for you to speak to. We've had the opportunity to watch you kind of grow in your knowledge and understanding, and one of the things that I know that we often share with as many people as we can is your website around teaching humanity, the wealth of knowledge of books and resources and the connections you made there. I would love for you to share that as a resource to teachers that are listening and educators who are listening.
Yeah, so that really began at the same time that I was learning about ethnic studies. I was working at the district at the time as a ELA instructional coach, and we were in the heart of the pandemic, and my role was to create videos that teachers K through 12 could use to teach ELA, and the focus needed to be on reading strategies. And initially the idea was, can you use our existing curriculum and just create lessons? And so I pitched this idea. Our district had just, adopted this plan to have K through 12 ethnic studies, and that until full implementation that we would use the social justice standards from Learning for Justice. And so I said, how about I don't use the curriculum? How about I do research on, looking for diverse texts that can meet the social justice standards, but also meet our Common Core standards, our Since Time Immemorial, which is a Washington State program that was created, curriculum that was created by all the tribes here, meet their standards as well. And somehow miraculously, I was given the green light. And so now it was like, okay, I need to hit the library and just, a little plug for the library. Oh my gosh, you can check out like 50 books at a time, and they just have, it just amazes me that anyone from any walk of life can come into the library and just be entrusted with like $1,000 worth of material. But anyway, that's a side note. And so every week I was just, going through books and trying to figure out how to connect it to the specific reading strategies that I was needing to teach for that week, because I had to create, 2 videos for kindergarten, first, second, third, or fourth, and fifth every week. And so, or maybe it was just one. Actually, I'm not sure. But it ended up being 150 lessons. And I learned so much about children's literature and how beautiful some of these works are, and also how problematic so many of our texts are. And I got, a front row seat into that, is particularly the way that we teach, or the texts that we have that kind of try to share Indigenous history. Like, it's really important for us to be using a critical lens when we are evaluating texts. And so anyway, I was doing all this research. I was really honing in on a handful of fantastic books. And when I was done with that year, I was just like, how do I make sure that I don't lose this knowledge and also just share with other people? So I created a website called Teaching Humanity, and it has just a ton of books on there. Like, if you're looking for a book on intergenerational relationships, like I shared before, you'll see Drawn Together on there. I also shared ways that I've used it in my classroom. I share standards that connect both Common Core and social justice standards, and then any other relevant, like, additional resources that I find useful, I just put it on there. I also organized it so that if you're wanting to teach the social justice standards specifically, so if you're like, I need a lesson on identity, you'll find a collection of books there that you can use. And it's all just free, and what I'm just hoping is that teachers, can use this resource and really just start to center these voices in their classroom and just see where it can take them.
I love it. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And even, when I've had a chance to look through some of the books that are on your website and how they spoke to me as an adult, but nevertheless, and I reflect upon, my educational upbringing within the school system, the fact that a lot of the books that were shared, I didn't identify, right, in any way, shape, or form, but seeing books about, a barbershop, nevertheless, a black barbershop, and thinking about, being a king and all these opportunities. For me, it was like, whoa, you're talking to me, right? And I bet there's a lot of youth out there that need those voices and those experiences at the forefront of their educational experience and formal education, right?
Yeah.
Because it also, I would say that it also brings their stories from home to the table within the frame of a book, right?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Brings us back to social emotional learning,
Right.
And how it's all rooted.
Yes, it's all connected.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your time. It's, every time we have the chance to sit down with you, I know I always walk away with new knowledge.
And I feel the same with you.
Yeah, so just this gift of time together, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you both so much.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron. Make sure you check out the website, Teaching for Humanity.
Actually, it's just Teaching Humanity.
Teaching Humanity. Thank you for that. See? That's why I said it out loud. We all need that.
All right.
With innovation as a central theme in this conversation, educators discuss in detail the content and pedagogies that center ethnic studies in elementary school. Dana shared her life experience, lessons, and journey as an educator and curriculum writer with valuable insight on the value, impacts, and practices of shared knowledge and co-creation. Joining us from Nisqually land, Dana discusses her perspectives and approaches aimed at centering Indigenous narratives and worldview by looking at new ways of engaging familial knowledge and relationships in her classroom. Her approaches go beyond SEL standards to integrate ethnic studies lenses that cultivate interpersonal relationships, connection, and a sense of belonging. From exploring Nisqually history to exploring their watershed and local land base, Dana has integrated science, history, and writing skills into curriculum through the exploration of critical and system thinking and solution-posing engagement. Topics that explore the relationship and solidarity with local Nisqually tribes, also relating and connecting back to the health of their local watershed, the salmon, and the surrounding environment. Student-led research surfaces a historical context of government policies and the impact of broken treaties, as well as cultivating student agency in the co-creation of mixed media projects and a call to action to protect the local watershed. At the core of the conversation is a theme of praxis, theory, practice, reflection, coupled with our methods to engage and provide tools for critical thinking and expression. This episode provides a wealth of inspiration and tools, and we're so grateful for the insight of Dana as a curriculum writer with teaching strategies behind more than 150 literature lessons. She's uniquely positioned to offer us practical tools that address the gaps in the curriculum in order to highlight Indigenous experiences in the classroom. Please check out www.teachinghumanity.org, a virtual hub and resource for educators, parents, and community, where you can find videos, curriculum, and tools on social justice and ethnic studies content and pedagogy. We're a growing movement, and if what you heard in this episode inspires you, we invite and highly encourage you to become a CLEAS member and to help spread the word to your folks. Donations for this podcast are always welcome, needed, and appreciated, and you can donate online on our website at ethnicstudies-coalition.org.
You can find the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. And check out our podcast show notes and website at ethnicstudies-coalition.org, where you can find more tools, merch, and information and resources mentioned on this episode and on our podcast in general. Learning Liberation, the Ethnic Studies podcast, is produced by members of the podcast team of the Coalition for Liberated Ethnic Studies. Our theme music was produced by Coalition member Sharif. Our podcast art is designed by me, and the podcast is hosted by Juana Teresa Tello and myself, J.R. Arabuanga. From the front lines in the classroom to the front lines in the streets, sending revolutionary love and solidarity your way. Peace.